If I go down for murder, y'all go down for murder. Hey, what's going on? I'm Kris. This is Epic History TV's newest video, 1848, Europe's Year of Revolutions. I got some nachos, some beer, some soda. I mean, you pretty much know what it's going to be about. Hold on. Let's get Papa some more light. Papa's me in this reference. Okay. So, get your snacks, and I'll mute the mic when I snack. Like, subscribe. Video start now.
1848. More than 3 decades after his defeat, the shadow of Napoleon Bonaparte and the French Revolution still looms over Europe. The peace settlement of 1815 had been a triumph for reactionary forces. Europe's great powers, Britain, France, Austria, Prussia and Russia, were committed to working together to ensure no more revolutions. Radicalism and republicanism would not be allowed to disturb the peace of Europe again. Austrian Chancellor Prince Clemens.
Boy, the French Revolution really did throw a big monkey wrench into everything, didn't it? That caused a lot of fighting.
Von Metternich is regarded as the architect of this new conservative order.
I remember
Some
him.
historians call it the Metternich system. And yet, across Europe, there are many for whom the ideals of the French Revolution remain not a nightmare, but an inspiration. Liberals seek personal freedoms and civil rights, such as equality before the law, protected by constitutions, a free press, and regular elections. Nationalists share these aims with a desire in Italy and Germany for national unification, or in the multi-ethnic Austrian Empire for greater recognition, autonomy, and respect for language.
Sorry.
Poles continue to seek the restoration of an independent Poland, and have launched one bloody uprising against the Russians in 1830. Their cause is supported by liberals across Europe. In most countries, liberals and nationalists face draconian censorship laws, arrest by the secret police, and bans on political parties and meetings. But there are always loopholes. In France, private banquets turn into political rallies. In Italy, scientific societies discuss politics, while gymnastic groups do the same in Germany. These liberal movements are dominated by the middle
Gymnastics groups, did I hear? Okay.
class, with their own local and national agendas, but also many shared values and aims. They are passionate, organized, and waiting for their opportunity.
Of course they are. I believe that right now we are sleeping. That's the language channel again here. Can you not feel the revolution here?
But it isn't just the middle classes that want change. By 1848, rising populations and food prices had created hunger, poverty, and social unrest across Europe. Low wages and hunger drive peasants to cities in increasing numbers, where they become cheap labor to feed the growing pace of industrialization. They live in slums and work long hours in dreadful conditions, if they can find work. Violent protests by workers and peasants are on the rise. Harvest failures and potato blight make a bad
Bavarian beer riots. That sounds delicious.
situation worse, with a deadly famine in Ireland and food riots across France. In the face of such crises, Europe's governments offer little support or hope of reform. When French Prime Minister François Guizot is challenged that only the richest 0.5% could vote in France, he merely replies, "Enrichissez-vous, get rich." In the winter of 1847-48, a sharp economic downturn throws thousands more out of work. The case for reform is more urgent than ever, but Europe's governments fail to act. The stage is set for a European revolution. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, the online community with thousands of classes for everyone who loves learning. Skillshare is the perfect place to hone your creative skills across a huge range of topics. Today, thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video.
Good job, Skillshare.
In southern Italy, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies is ruled by Spanish Bourbon King Ferdinand II. His disastrous agrarian reforms have united Sicilian landowners and peasants against him. His kingdom will witness 1848's first revolution. In Sicily, furious crowds chase Bourbon troops out of Palermo, and the island declares independence, readopting its liberal constitution of 1812. Revolutionary fervour spreads to the mainland. Mass rallies in Naples force King Ferdinand to issue his own constitution. In Piedmont, Sardinia, the threat of revolution persuades King Carlo Alberto to grant a constitution, and there are celebrations in the streets of Turin.
Now, was most of this out of fear for what had happened in France and the fact that these kings were like, they could still lose their head, even though, it was supposed to be all mellow now, but, revolution gets in the air, and if you're the king, you start going, whew, it's getting warm in here.
Across the border in Austrian-ruled Lombardy-Venetia, Italian nationalists revolt in Milan and Venice, and drive out the Austrian garrisons. But as dramatic as these events are, they're about to be eclipsed by news from Paris. Since France's 1830 July Revolution, the country has been ruled by Louis-Philippe, the so-called Citizen King. He's a more moderate figure than his Bourbon predecessor, Charles X, but he opposes further reform, despite the growing economic crisis. His Prime Minister, François Guizot, is hated. When he bans the banquets that are really opposition rallies, angry crowds march through Paris, chanting, "Down with Guizot! Long live reform!" Guizot resigns, but it is not enough. Nervous troops fire on the crowds. 52 civilians are killed. Louis-Philippe loses control of the capital, and as the mob advances on the Tuileries Palace, he abdicates and flees to England. A new provisional government is formed, and from the Hôtel de Ville, new Foreign Minister Alphonse de Lamartine announces, "The Republic has been proclaimed." France's monarchy has fallen in just 3 days.
Wow.
The news is carried across Europe by the new telegraph system. The effect is electrifying.
I bet.
75-year-old Austrian Chancellor Prince Metternich is among the first to be informed of the revolution in Paris. His police chief assures him there's no chance of such a thing happening in Vienna. But on the 13th of March,
there it is.
Around 4,000 students, inspired by the news from Paris, march on the Landhaus, the assembly building, and force their way in. There's a confrontation with troops who open fire and kill 4. Vienna's workers side with the students. Much of the crowd's hostility is directed at Metternich. When the State Council suggests he resign, Metternich meekly agrees and heads into exile in England. One of the most extraordinary political careers in Europe's history, spanning 40 years, comes to an end. Emperor Ferdinand suffers from epilepsy and a speech impediment, and is a largely passive figure. But when his council announces there will be elections for an assembly that will draft a constitution, crowds cheer him in the street. The secret police disappear. Censorship is ignored. The people of Vienna celebrate.
That king was just saving his own butt, wasn't he? He's smart.
Nationalists within the Austrian Empire are also inspired by events. In the Hungarian parliament, politician Lajos Kossuth makes a fiery speech denouncing Habsburg absolutism as the pestilential air which dulls our nerves and paralyzes our spirit. His speech is printed and circulated widely, inspiring others across the empire. Hungarians launch their own revolution, with 12 demands that include greater autonomy, a free press, and parliamentary reform. Czech liberals in Prague form a national committee and also send their demands to Vienna. There is even a Romanian nationalist uprising in the Ottoman province of Wallachia, forcing the abdication of the local prince.
Man, it's just a wind blowing through there and everyone's just, yep, change, we want change, we want change. That's, wow. Wow. Yeah.
Across the smaller states of Germany, rulers face popular demands for reform. Most quickly grant concessions to avoid losing their thrones. The black, red and gold tricolour, symbol of a united Germany, is prominent among the crowds. Germany's first ever National Assembly meets in Frankfurt, with elected delegates from across Germany. They debate how they will achieve the liberal dream of a unified Germany, and begin drafting its national constitution. In the Prussian capital, Berlin, students and liberals are thrilled by developments and celebrate Metternich's fall. King Frederick William IV promises reform, but also moves extra troops into the city. Tensions escalate between Berliners and soldiers, and on the 18th of March, protesters erect barricades. The army attacks, leading to vicious fighting in the streets. 800 protesters are killed. The king loses his stomach for the slaughter and withdraws troops from the city, promising a new constitution.
He had to know, as soon as he brought troops in, all it's going to do is just provoke people.
Not all Europe is embracing change. In Russia, Emperor Nicholas firmly opposes any reforms. He'd been badly shaken by the Decembrist revolt on the opening day of his reign.
Oh yeah.
Since then, he has tightened censorship and created a new secret police unit, the Third Department. There is a crackdown on all suspected subversives. Writer Fyodor Dostoevsky is among those arrested and subjected to a mock execution before he is exiled to Siberia. There will be no concessions in Russia. By European standards, Britain is already a liberal constitutional monarchy, and the middle classes broadly accept the status quo. But there is a popular movement calling for more democratic reforms. They're known as the Chartists, for the 6-point charter they wish to implement. A mass rally is organised for the 10th of April in London. This is a photograph of that meeting. The authorities fear violence and draft in 80,000 extra police. But the event passes off peacefully.
That's cool.
In the Netherlands, King William II backs a new constitution and reforms, successfully preempting any revolutionary disturbance. With fortuitous timing, Frederick VII of Denmark had abolished royal absolutism in January, so also avoids revolution. But he faces a German nationalist revolt in Schleswig-Holstein, which leads to war with the German Confederation. Denmark will ultimately prevail in this war thanks to diplomatic support from the other European powers. In 1848, Polish hopes were high that these revolutions would pave the way for the restoration of an independent Poland. Europe's liberals, after all, had frequently expressed enthusiasm for the idea. But in reality, no major power is willing to risk confrontation with Russia for the sake of the Poles. A Polish rising in Posen is put down by the Prussians, while the Austrians deal with risings in Krakow and Galicia. The first euphoric phase of the European revolutions becomes known as the springtime of the peoples. With censorship relaxed, there's an explosion in the number of newspapers, among them Cologne's radical new...
Sorry, I want to go back and look at that statue. I know it doesn't really make sense, but there were years on there, so I'd like a... Wow, sorry. 1793, I'm guessing... no, I'm not going to guess. Only thing I could think of was would have been the first battle with Napoleon. Was that when the French Revolution began? I should know this. I watched the video. I watch a lot of videos. I apologize. 1830 wasn't the Novembrists. That was 25. So 1830 was something that I don't remember. And then 48, obviously now. Am I wrong on that? At least for the 1793, I know that was Napoleon. It has to be the French Revolution. So does something happen what happened in 1830? What don't I know? What don't I remember? I apologize. I drink a lot, can't help it. Watch these videos, drink, ask a lot of questions, and then I always forget. Back to the video.
Known as the springtime of the peoples.
Springtime of the peoples.
With censorship relaxed, there's an explosion in the number of newspapers, among them Cologne's radical new daily, Neue Rheinische Zeitung, edited by Karl Marx. It feels like the dawn of a new era. But these early successes are built on the back of an uneasy alliance, as Marx is quick to highlight. Middle-class liberals want constitutions, more inclusion in politics, and a free press. Workers, who are the revolutionary foot soldiers in many cities, want cheaper food and the right to work. German radicals sum it up with a neat pun: freedom to read versus freedom to feed. Europe's new assemblies are under pressure from conservatives who think they're going too far, and radicals and socialists who think they're not going far enough. Most horrifying of all to Europe's middle class, there hovers the threat of mass, direct action, social revolution, the mob.
Wow. Red or lead?
In the wake of the revolution, France's provisional government had set up national workshops, a public works program to alleviate unemployment in Paris. But just 3 months later, a new, more conservative government announces their closure. 100,000 workers are suddenly jobless. The response is immediate and furious. Over 3 days in June, Paris radicals take on the middle-class National Guard and regular troops in a bloody battle of the barricades. the Archbishop of Paris attempts to mediate, but is cut down in a crossfire.
Oh, wow.
This remarkable early photograph shows some of the Paris barricades fought over that summer.
Wow, you can see people. It's the outline of a person there. A jacket. Person there. Say what you want, but we are fortunate to live in a time like today. I mean, we're fortunate because people like these people went through hell to give us a better life. Wow.
By the time it's all over, General Cavaignac's troops have killed at least 1,500 workers and arrest 12,000 more, a third of whom are deported to Algeria. He believes he has saved France from anarchy.
They weren't Algerian fighters, right? They just took them and just kicked them out of the country? I'm guessing?
The sacred cause of the Republic has triumphed, he declares. The French Revolution has split between left and right, with bloody consequences.
Yeah.
It paves the way for the return of a famous name from the past, promising unity and order. That spring, conservative governments had been caught off guard by the speed of events. Now they begin to fight back. In Prague, Czech students clash with troops. The wife of Austrian commander General Windisch-Graetz is killed by a stray bullet. He responds by withdrawing his troops and bombarding the city's old town with artillery. 43 are killed before the students surrender. In Italy, King Carlo Alberto of Piedmont, Sardinia, has declared an Italian war of liberation against Austria and invades Lombardy Venetia. He is supported by the other Italian states and nationalist volunteers, including the Italian Legion, led by professional revolutionary Giuseppe Garibaldi.
Professional revolutionary? Okay.
Austrian forces in Italy are commanded by 81-year-old Field Marshal Radetzky, a distinguished veteran of the Napoleonic Wars.
He sounded familiar.
Vienna orders him to negotiate. Instead, Radetzky wages a masterful campaign, fending off the Piedmontese advance, then launching a decisive counterattack. Piedmontese forces retreat in disarray, and Carlo Alberto negotiates a truce. That summer, Johann Strauss composes the Radetzky March to celebrate the old general's victory.
I've heard that before. Never knew that's what it was.
Meanwhile,
cool.
Austrian relations with Hungary are in crisis. The country is now effectively independent, with its own elected parliament and a prime minister, Lajos Batthyány. But not everyone wants to be part of the new Hungary. Savage ethnic conflicts break out between Hungarians and Romanians in Transylvania and Hungarians and Serbs in Vojvodina, leaving thousands dead. An even greater threat is Croatian General Josip Jelačić, a fire-breathing imperial loyalist who takes matters into his own hands and invades what he regards as a renegade province.
Jesus.
The emperor still hopes for a peaceful resolution and sends a loyal general, Count Lamberg, to take command of Hungarian military forces. But on arrival, he's brutally murdered by a mob. Appalled, the imperial government declares war on the Hungarian revolutionaries. This in turn outrages liberals and radicals in Vienna. There is fresh violence on the streets, and the Austrian Minister of War is lynched. Troops evacuate the city, while the Emperor flees to Olmütz. Jelačić marches to the government's aid. He joins forces with Windisch Graetz outside Vienna, and together they bombard the city. Then they attack. The October Rising is crushed, with the loss of 2,000 lives. 25 revolutionary leaders are executed, including Robert Blum, a member of the German parliament in Frankfurt. He becomes a celebrated martyr of the revolutions. With Vienna secure, the Austrian invasion of Hungary can begin. The Hungarians are heavily outnumbered. Budapest falls, and the Hungarian government evacuates to Debrecen.
40,000 men needed around Berlin. Order in Berlin, and we shall have order in the country.
Following the violence in Berlin that March, the King of Prussia withdraws to his palace at Potsdam, on the outskirts of the city. Here he is surrounded by loyal troops and conservative advisors, including a 33-year-old aristocrat named Otto von Bismarck. When asked for his view on...
Bismarck was the German... Oh my gosh. He was like... What do you call him? Or not call himself, but what was he labeled? Was he the German Chancellor? Is that correct? But he was pretty much like the president? What, I mean, is that... I don't remember the exact term. Chancellor? I don't remember the exact terminology of... Jesus, how many people died this year in 1848? Good God.
On what should be done, Bismarck says nothing, but leans over to a piano and taps out the March of the Prussian Infantry. The forces of conservatism are strong in Prussia. There is deep loyalty to the state and the king. Allies, like Bismarck, adopt the enemy's tactics, launching conservative political organizations and newspapers to mobilize this support. By November, King Frederick William has noted the infighting of his opponents and the defeat of the Vienna Revolution, and decides to act. He orders General Wrangel to lead 13,000 troops into Berlin. They enter the city unopposed and order the Prussian assembly to disperse. It has no option but to comply. Prussia will get its constitution, but it is one handed down by the king, under which he retains full executive power. Prussian dreams of a true parliamentary system, even a republic, are dashed. In December, two new players take the stage, who will play key roles in shaping the fate of Europe's revolutions. In Vienna, Emperor Ferdinand abdicates in favor of his 18-year-old nephew, Franz Joseph. He will reign until his death in 1916. In Paris, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte.
I remember hearing about his death during World War I believe. Something was... It's unrelated to the video, but... I apologize. Anyways, I remember hearing about that. That was 1914 to 1918. Unrelated to the video. Moving on.
Nephew of Emperor Napoleon, is elected President of the French Republic in a landslide victory.
Stupid question. How many Bonapartes are there alive today? Are there any? Do they... do they, in politics or anything, or is it just the names falling off and people just don't know? Just curious.
He promises to heal divisions, impose order, and restore France to her former glory. In Italy, the tumult continues into 1849.
The tumult.
In the Papal States, the reforms of Pope Pius had seen him held up as an unlikely liberal role model. But escalating radicalism and violence, notably the assassination of his justice minister, Pellegrino Rossi, caused Pope Pius to flee Rome. In his absence, a Roman Republic is declared. It is led by Giuseppe Mazzini, the iconic figurehead of Italian nationalism, who's devoted his life to the unification of his homeland. But elsewhere, the Italian cause fares badly. Carlo Alberto resumes his war with Austria, with disastrous consequences. At the Battle of Novara, Radetzky inflicts another heavy defeat. Carlo Alberto abdicates in favor of his son, Vittorio Emanuele, to avoid a republican revolution. 12 years later, he'll become the first king of a modern united Italy.
Okay.
In the south, Ferdinand reverts to absolutist rule and sends troops to Sicily who stamp out the revolution. Then, to the dismay of liberals across Europe, French President Louis Napoleon sends troops to crush the Republic of Rome and put the Pope back on his throne. He has decided the support of French Catholics is more important to him than the fate of Italian Republicans. French forces are led by General Oudinot, son of the famous Marshal.
General Oudinot, the son of the famous Marshal. You, sir, not this man, Oudinot himself, is a man I will never forget. He may not have been the best Marshal, but he was number one in my heart.
Rome's defenders are led by Garibaldi. But despite skilled and courageous resistance, Rome is forced to surrender after a 2-month siege. That summer, Radetzky also retakes Venice and puts an end to its republic. In March...
Isn't it weird that Radetzky, a former Napoleon Marshal, and a son of a Napoleon Marshal are putting people in their place? Radetzky isn't important. What we should be focusing on is the son of General Oudinot, of Marshal Oudinot. That's who we should be focusing on, and his greatness. Man was injured 36 times. I'll never forget it. I will keep chanting that. I'm his
The German National Parliament in Frankfurt had finally agreed on a constitution for a united Germany. It is to be a constitutional monarchy under an emperor. The man intended to play this role is Frederick William of Prussia. So when he declines the offer, the plan is killed stone dead.
Come on.
In public, he says it is impossible without the consent of the other German princes. In private, he says he would never accept a crown from the gutter, disgraced by the stink of revolution.
Jeez.
Revolts in support of the national constitution break out in Saxony, the Palatinate, and the Grand Duchy of Baden. They are crushed by local forces, assisted by Prussian troops. The Frankfurt Parliament itself is dissolved. What hope there had been for a united Germany under a liberal constitution lies in ruins. In Austria, the new Emperor Franz Joseph issues his own new constitution, reclaiming almost all political power. He also revokes all the liberal reforms passed by the Hungarian parliament, known as the April Laws. In response, Lajos Kossuth declares formal Hungarian independence, and the country begins an extraordinary campaign of military mobilization. Hungarian commander General Gergely retakes Budapest. He then launches a bloody assault on Buda Castle, overpowering its Austrian garrison. In desperation, the Austrian Emperor travels to Warsaw to formally request military aid from the Emperor of Russia. Russian troops have already moved into Moldavia and then Wallachia to put down the Romanian liberal revolution. Nicholas now agrees to send troops to Hungary to crush those he describes as the enemies of order and tranquility. Hungary faces an impossible strategic situation, surrounded and outnumbered more than 2-1. The combined onslaught is irresistible. The Hungarian forces are driven south and finally forced to surrender.
You gotta watch.
In the aftermath, around 120 Hungarian politicians and army officers are executed.
Wow.
So ends Hungary's War of Independence.
Where are you going?
1848 was a year like no other. A series of seismic political events following one upon another like falling dominoes. But what had been achieved? A British historian famously described 1848 as the turning point at which modern history failed to turn. And for all the euphoria of Europe's springtime of the peoples, by 1849, it seemed that the counter-revolutionaries had won everywhere. But some gains did endure, such as the abolition of serfdom in Austria and the popular vote in France, though France became a little less democratic in 1852, after Louis Napoleon made himself emperor.
Of course he did.
Across Europe, governments modernized and paid more attention to economic and social issues, partly in response to the new challenges that had emerged from socialist and working-class politics. The causes of German and Italian unification had been defeated, but made giant strides and learned crucial lessons. Their goals would not be achieved by ideas alone, but the realities of force. In the words of Bismarck, the great questions of the day were to be settled not through speeches and majority decisions, but by iron and blood. It would be wars waged by powerful monarchies that united Germany and Italy. The legacy of 1848, for good and ill, would be felt for decades to come.
I gotta put you down, okay? Gotta pause the video. What'd you think of the video? You gotta tell them. What'd you think of the video? What did you think of the video? I don't know. You're not helping me at all. You're supposed to be the second person here. You're supposed to help me. You're not helping me at all. No, I'm not going to keep... Okay, I'll keep rubbing your stomach. So that was the video, and my helper here is not helping me at all. She's just demanding a stomach rub. Okay, what do you say? Nothing? This is a good video. I enjoyed it. Did you enjoy it? I'm gonna set you down because you... Watch yourself. Watch yourself. Slow landing. There you go. Okay. Pinch your face. Okay. This is good. Man, 1848 was very, yeah, it was full of revolutions, wasn't it? And for us, in the U.S., 1848 was, 1846 to 1848 was the U.S.-Mexican War, I believe. So, we were too busy fighting Mexico in a war that we shouldn't have been fighting. So, we were fighting a war too. But, you know, we're Americans, so we're always fighting wars. So, what's that mean? Absolutely nothing. What the hell are you doing? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this here. This is a good video. I need more nachos and more beer. Excuse me. Dogs have no respect for you. They just walked up and pawed me. And their nails. It's rude. Alright, I'm going to end this here. Like and subscribe. And peanut butter.